Hello, Reading Room. This is Dr. Annette Feravich. I am here live in the classroom. I'm the teacher. It is day 341. It is April 28th, and we keep doing what we do best. And right now it is reading, right? That's what I said. We're changing things up, but not for the reading room. We're still working on this book, which is a pretty amazing book to me. I love the idea that it gives me ideas. And I have always been a person who likes to think about God on the biggest terms. So we're sticking with this. I realize some people don't want to hear it. You know what to do. Okay. Where most thinkers, rightly I believe, see an unrealistic and unattainable. This is the chapter by Howard J. Van Til, and it is called No Place for a Small God is this chapter, and it is part 2 of this book, which is, the first part was perspectives on science and theology, and the second part, which is what we're in, chapter number 3 for part 2, approaches to scientific and theological answers. And again, this is No Place for a Small God by Howard J. Van Til. Where most thinkers, rightly I believe, see an unrealistic and unattainable task in this quest for comprehending the self-transformation of an absolutely nothing into a robust something, Atkins sees only an interesting challenge for scientific theorizing. We shall, in a sense, need to model nothing and to see if its consequences are this world. I don't regard this as impossible or ludicrous. I regard it as a next logical step for the development of the paradigms of science. In contrast to Atkins, however, most of us would regard this enterprise as both impossible and ludicrous. Rhetorical bluster may intimidate those who are unsure of their case in a debate or in a court of law, but I have never known it to generate profound comprehension of substantive matters. Atkins' faith in the omnicompetence of science is replaced in his book Creation Revisited with, it must be noted, extensive borrowing of rhetoric from the poetic language of the Bible. This is the quote. In the beginning, there was nothing, absolute void, not merely empty space. There was no space, nor was there time, for this was before time. The universe was without form and void. By chance, there was a fluctuation and a set of points emerging from nothing and taking their existence from the pattern they formed, defined a time. The chance formation of a pattern resulted in the emergence of time from coalesced opposites, its emergence from nothing, from absolute nothing. Absolutely without intervention, there came into being rudimentary existence. The emergence of the dust points and their chance organization into time was the haphazard, unmotivated action that brought them into being. Okay, so that's from Atkins again. But what's interesting to me right there is what did come out of nothing. And that was time, wasn't it? Wasn't it? When we put calendars on it and we put clocks on it, right? Instead of the sunshine on it, and our basic intuitive feelings for what somebody might need from us at that time, right? But what very clearly, and it's almost said right here, by the chance there was a fluctuation and a set of points emerging from nothing and taking their existence from the pattern they formed, defined a time. Right there. The chance formation of a pattern resulted in the emergence of time from coalesced opposites, its emergence from nothing. Wow. It would appear that in spite of his expression elsewhere of low regard for the ability of poetry to express anything of value, he nonetheless freely employs the poetic genre to titillate his readers with his lyric expression of unbounded faith in the ability of absolute nothingness to self-transformation into our robustly functioning universe. Atkins' self-creating universe must, however, like all other self-creating universes, begin with some form of self. Thus, what Atkins has done is not to demonstrate that a creator is unnecessary, but merely to give his own version of a creator a succession of new names. First, absolutely nothing, and then this universe. So that's also what came out of nothing. The words. Absolute nothing, this universe. Now we're starting to define a creator. In comparison to his claims, Atkins' accomplishment seems quite modest. Atkins may be among the most strident advocates of the metaphysical doctrine that the universe needs no creator, but he is not alone in giving such a conjecture serious consideration. In his introduction to Stephen Hawking's immensely popular book, A Brief History of Time, astronomer Carl Sagan commends both the book and its author for providing readers with lucid revelations on the frontiers of physics, astronomy, cosmology, and courage. He then goes on to say, this is also a book about God, or perhaps about the absence of God. The word God fills these pages. Hawking embarks on a quest to answer Einstein's famous question about whether God had any choice in creating the universe. Hawking is attempting, as he explicitly states, to understand the mind of God. And this makes all the more unexpected the conclusion to the effort, at least so far. A universe with no edge in space, no beginning or end in time, and nothing for a creator to do. Let's look at that. I'm going to look at that reference. Carl Sagan, Introduction. That's from the introduction in Stephen Hawking's book, A Brief History of Time. Okay? Hawking does raise the question concerning the universe's need for a creator, but the ambivalence of his answer is somewhat puzzling. In Hawking's own words, the idea that space and time may form a closed surface without boundary also has profound implications for the role of God in the affairs of the universe. With the success of scientific theories in describing events, most people have come to believe that God allows the universe to evolve according to a set of laws and does not intervene in the universe to break these laws. However, the laws do not tell us what the universe should have looked like when it started. It would still be up to God to wind up the clock and choose how to start it off. So long as the universe had a beginning, we could suppose it had a creator. But if the universe is really self-contained, having no boundary or edge, it would have neither beginning nor end. It would simply be. What place then for a creator? I want to reread this. Hawking does raise the question concerning the universe's need for a creator, but the ambivalence of his answer is somewhat puzzling. And this is what I think, this is how I interpret that. I interpret that as your ambivalence does not matter one single bit. Your knowledge, your understanding of God, of the creator, whether you believe in him or you don't believe in him, he's going to still do his job. He's going to do his job. He knows his job. He knows how to create. He knows how to destroy. He knows what he wants in this world. That ambivalence I find to be just spiritually moving. I'm going to do my job. That's going to be a goddamn good job. And I'm ambivalent to what you think about it. That's what that says to me. And that, in my view, gives some really broad perspectives to God, and also some really broad perspectives about the need God has for glory or recognition or anything else. He needs, I think, to hear our prayers. I think he wants to hear our prayers. I think he wants to give us a vote, right? But if you don't want to vote, he doesn't care. He'll continue with this plan. And I don't know. What does that say? God's in control to me. That's what it says. Agree with them, don't agree with them. Call them evil. Call them heartless. Now, that's not me. But he's going to bring this world together the way he wants to bring this world together. And he's ambivalent about what you think about it, about what you believe about it. He knows what's healthy for you. He knows what side of the line you should fall on. But he's ambivalent. He will use you. In some of the most unexpected ways. You don't have to believe. God will use you. I don't have to believe. I can believe. I can believe fervently. So when God uses me, I'm less afraid. The implied answer to Hawking's question is, as Sagan seems to have presumed in his introduction, no place at all. I must, however, entertain the possibility that Hawking is not necessarily insisting on the negative answer, but he is perhaps challenging the theists among his readers to articulate some more profound and positive answer. After reflecting on Hawking's conjecture regarding a self-contained universe that had neither beginning nor end, an interviewer once asked him, does that mean there was no act of creation and therefore that there's no place for God? Hawking's reply was, I still believe the universe has a beginning in real time at a big bang, but there's another kind of time, imaginary time at right angles to real time, in which the universe has no beginning or end. This would mean that the way the universe began would be determined by the law of physics. One wouldn't have to say that God chose to set the universe going in some arbitrary way that we couldn't understand. It says nothing about whether or not God exists, just that he is not arbitrary. He doesn't throw a dart and wonder where it's going to land. He's not arbitrary. He doesn't throw up his hands and wonder what's going to happen. It's not arbitrary. But the interviewer persisted. I think that many people do feel you have effectively dispensed with God. Are you denying that then? To this direct question, Hawking responded, all that my work has shown is that you don't have to say that the way the universe began was the personal whim of God. But you still have the question, why does the universe bother to exist? If you like, you can define God to be the answer to that question. In another context, Hawking's response to the same question was, I don't know the answer to that. There are substantive differences among the views expressed by Atkins, Sagan, and Hawking that must be respected. Nonetheless, they do deal with a common and very fundamental question. Is a creator necessary to give being to a universe? Hawking, with the blend of both tentativeness and ambiguity, appears willing to keep the question open for thoughtful reflection. Atkins, on the other hand, presumes to have made such a creator unnecessary simply by postulating, without a hint of tentativeness, that absolutely nothing has the capacity to transform its nothingness into something like this universe. that absolutely nothing has the capacity. Okay, so his tentativeness is absolutely nothing would not have the capacity to transform nothingness into something, especially like this universe. Surely this represents a singularly facile way to deal with a substantive question, solve the mystery of existence by sheer assertion alone, simply declaring that the universe needs no transcendent power to give it being. And that's also the difference there, right there too. Those words, some of the words, like transcendent. It doesn't need a transcendent power. We're not quite sure. So that I want to highlight, and I also want to highlight that so Sagan says, no place at all. Atkins says, the emergence of dust points and their chance organization into time was a haphazard, unmotivated action that brought them into being. That's what Atkins says. It would appear that in spite of his expression elsewhere of a low regard for the ability of poetry to express anything of value. It's just really interesting, isn't it? And then Hawkins does raise the question of the universe's need for a creator, but the ambivalence of his answer is somewhat puzzling. Ambivalent. Ambivalent, and what was the other word? But it's not arbitrary. God can be ambivalent to what your wants and needs are, but his plan is not arbitrary. And that is poetry, Atkins. That's poetry. The robust formational economy principle. The second version of the No Place for God thesis places less emphasis on questions regarding either the temporal beginning or the ultimate source of the universe's existence, and it focuses instead on the robustness of its powers for organizing itself into novel or more complex forms. The natural sciences, in their activity of constructing theories regarding the formational history of both inanimate structures, that's galaxies, stars, and planets, for instance, and living organisms, do ordinarily presume that matter and material systems possess a sufficiently robust set of self-organizational capacities to make possible the actualization in time of all the physical and biotic forms that have ever appeared in the history of the universe. This robust formational economy principle, as I would name it, is seldom given explicit statement. Nonetheless, it constitutes, I believe, one of the foundational presuppositions of contemporary science, especially in its theorizing regarding formational histories. Okay, so now this is getting to the author's opinion. I'm not getting it yet. This is Van Til. In the context of this essay, the question at issue is, does the principle provide any support for the No Place for God thesis? The rhetoric of many proponents of the naturalistic worldview is built on the presumption of a yes answer. My answer, on the contrary, no. Not only does the robust formational economy principle fail to provide warrant for the No Place for God thesis, but it makes the intentional action of a creator/provider even more essential. Realizing that my thesis runs counter to more familiar rhetoric, I need to develop my case with some care. First, what circumstance might encourage a proponent of naturalism to believe that his or her worldview would gain support if the robust formational economy principle were true? What the F are you talking about? The robust formational economy principle, which is that natural sciences and their activity of constructing theories regarding formational history of both inanimate structures and living organisms do not ordinarily presume that matter and material systems possess a sufficiently robust set of self-organizational capabilities to make possible the actualization in time of all physical and biotic forms that have ever appeared in the history of the universe. Okay, I got it now. What they're saying is this planet couldn't have come together without God. That's what he's saying. Without a creator or provider. Okay. Ironically, that encouragement may in large part arise from the common belief within the Christian community, particularly within its conservative evangelical portion, that the theological doctrine of creation either entails or is strengthened by the special creationist picture of God's creative activity. A major portion of the North American Christian community, for instance, posits not only that God gave being to the elemental substances of the universe at the beginning, and that God continually sustains a creation in being, but also that the arrangement of those elemental substances into specific physical and biotic forms required a succession of special divine creative acts in the course of time. By a special creative act, we here mean any immediate divine action performed for the purpose of bringing a new structure or life form into being, either by creatio ex nihilo or by coercing extant matter into configurations that it would not have been able to achieve by employing only its own limited powers for self-organization or transformation. This special creationist position comes in numerous versions. Young Earth special creationism, which holds that the Bible specifies a 6,000 to 10,000 year chronology. Old Earth creationism, which grants the 15 billion year chronology favored by natural sciences. And some variants of both progressive creationism and the surgent intelligent design perspective. Progressive creationism, I'm going to give you that site. So that would be, see the classic exposition of the view of Bernard Ram, The Christian View of Science and Scripture, from Grand Rapids, Michigan, Eerdmans, 1956. That's interesting. I've been there. Eerdmans Publishing, to the Christian bookstore, and yeah, I'm just looking at these names here. And to the Catholic bookstore as well. See, for instance, the creation, and this is the next reference, and this is the if you want references, and this is the reference for the resurgent intelligent design perspective. See, for instance, the creation hypothesis, scientific evidence for an intelligent designer by J.P. Moreland. I've read some of that. I've read most of Discovery Institute stuff. And also see Michael J. It's Behe, I think. That's how you pronounce it. Last name. Darwin's Black Box, the Biochemical Challenge to Evolution. Yeah, that we did look at all of those books in at the Discovery Institute that I went to in Texas, and yeah, it was really good. You know, except for a few other things. All right. There we go. Okay. Common to all these versions of special creationism, however, is the idea that the present array of physical and biotic forms could not have been assembled without a number of special creative acts, often referred to as divine interventions in the course of time. A fundamental, and see, to me, if Einstein, for example, if all that were true, E equals mc squared, and we had a new idea about energy, I always thought that's divine intervention as well. So these genius ideas that people have, and the only way you get these genius ideas in my mind is that when you spread your mind out by reading things that give you a chance to ask some really interesting questions. A fundamental presumption of special creationism, although it is not always stated as explicitly as this, is that self-organizational and transformational capabilities of atoms, molecules, and cells are not sufficient to bring about the actualization of all structures and forms that we now see, at least not all of the biotic forms. Thus, it must be the case, goes the familiar argument, that God has intervened at certain times to introduce specific novel forms that could not have arisen by exercise of any natural capabilities. With all due respect for those proponents of special creationism whose intent is to maintain a high regard for divine power over the created world and to ensure a place of need for the immediate exercise of that power to actualize at least some biotic forms, I must nevertheless state candidly that even as one wholly committed to the Christian faith, I have substantive difficulties with this perspective. Contrary to the beliefs of many of its contemporary proponents, I do not find warrant for the claim that scriptures require one to adopt this perspective. Neither do I find any merit in the common presumption that the special creation scenario constitutes one of the deliverances of the saints, that is, one of the foundational beliefs of the early Christian community. Furthermore, I would argue that the special creationist position invites a naturalistic challenge, a form of the no place for God sentiment that can be paraphrased as, if there is no gaps in the formational economy of the universe, what need then for a creator? There is no scarcity of literature that conveys this naturalistic challenge. Atkins, cited earlier, provides an abundance of examples. Zoologist Richard Dawkins, I even hate that fucking word, in The Blind Watchmaker and other works, presumes to have established the no place for God thesis once and for all. A similar claim is offered by Francis Crick in The Astonishing Hypothesis. For the moment, however, let me evaluate and respond to the line of thought developed in a recent book by philosopher Daniel C. Dennett, Darwin's Dangerous Idea, another book we read in Discovery Institute, and also The Blind Watchmaker we looked at. One of the questions that Dennett considers is, how do the things we see in the world around us, especially living things, come to exhibit design, whether in their intentional workings or in their adaptation to the peculiarities of some environment? For Dennett, the term design functions as the generic category for any feature of the world, especially of its life forms, that is likely to give one of the impression of being the outcome of an intentional action of an intelligent agent. More than mere order, design is Aristotle's telos, an exploitation of order for purpose. And that's my perspective right there. So walk around and contemplate about the existence of God. What do you think he wants you to do? Be a sheeple? The first of two major possibilities that Dennett considers is a traditional mind-first approach. Things in our world manifest design because they proceed from a pre-existing mind, an approach that Dennett associates with John Locke. Now, also, I'm almost positive this was also part of our readings as well. If Locke is right, mind must come first, or at least tied for first. This is a quote. If Locke is right, from Dennett, if Locke is right, mind must come first, or at least tied for first. It could not come into existence at some later date as an effect of some confluence of more modest, mindless phenomena. The traditional idea that God is a rational thinking agent, a designer and a builder of the world, is here given the highest stamp of scientific approval. Like a mathematical theorem, its denial is supposedly impossible to conceive, and so it seemed to many brilliant and skeptical thinkers before Darwin. Dennett sees a similar sentiment in the phenomenon of 18th century natural theology with its apologetic strategy of arguing from the empirical observation of design to the conclusion of the existence of a designer. The overwhelming favor among purportedly scientific arguments for religious conclusions then and now was one version or another of the argument from design. This is a quote. Among the effects we can objectively observe in the world, there are many that cannot be, for various reasons, mere accidents. They must have been designed to be as they are, and there cannot be design without a designer. Therefore, a designer God must exist or have existed as the source of all these wonderful effects. It is, I believe, important to note, that was the end of the quote. And then that was, let me give you the site there. Daniel Dennett, Darwin's Dangerous Idea, Evolution and the Meaning of Life. I had those on my Kindle, and they deleted my stupid Kindle. It really makes me mad. One person, let's see. One person, the artisan, did both the planning and the fabrication of what was planned. Paley's watchmaker, for instance, did both the planning and the construction of the watch. Paley's designer, like his watchmaker, had both a mind to plan or intend and the divine equivalent of hands, the power to manipulate raw materials into the intended form. The concept of special creation clearly resides in the same conceptual territory as that of an artisan or a designer. Now, one of the things I do have to say about these scientific perspectives, I appreciate them digging into this because this is the stuff that I like, and I kind of turn it over in my brain a little bit. But one of the things they also seem to leave out here is that he is not defined by your definitions. And every time that we try and, hone in exactly on a watchmaker, a mind, right? One of those things, we're missing other capacities. Because these are different perspectives. Who is this Paley anyway, since it was Dawkins that was being cited? As a proposed answer to the question, whence the appearance of design, Dennett forcefully rejects the handicrafter God of both special creationism and the argument from design. He characterizes such approaches as ill-conceived attempts to inject supernatural explanations into circumstances where natural explanations would suffice. In Dennett's colorful metaphor, he sees no need to appeal to a skyhook. Parentheses, the top-down action of some higher power. Now, I would also, I'll finish that sentence. When a crane, the bottom-up action of some extent natural mechanism, is able to do the job of lifting the biotic system to new heights of configurational complexity. And this is also, I find to be very interesting as well, because what you're talking about is the building up of, for example, my example, your home. Did that come from God? Wasn't that a bottom-up thing? When a bird builds a nest, aren't we seeing God work from the bottom up, not from the top down? I love working from the top down because he gave me this to work with. And I think he appreciates my interest. I think he appreciates your interest, right? That's how I think God is defined. The skyhook, we don't have to look up to God and pray. We don't have to pray continuously. Some of us have faith to know enough to know that we don't have to pray continuously. that God will work for his purpose. But it helps my faith to be on board. Sometimes it's scary though, isn't it? Like I don't have all the information. The skyhook concept is perhaps a descendant of the deus ex machina of ancient Greek dramaturgy, when second-rate playwrights found the plots leading their heroes into inescapable difficulties. They were often tempted to crank down a god onto the scene like Superman to save the situation supernaturally. A skyhook is a mind first force or power or process, an exception to the principle that all design and apparent design is ultimately the result of mindless, motiveless mechanicity. A crane, in contrast, is a sub-process or special feature of a design process that can be demonstrated to permit the local speeding up of the basic slow process of natural selection, and that can be demonstrated to be itself the predictable or retrospectively explicable product of the basic process. Dennett's position regarding the success of the concept of biological evolution is comprised of three fundamental claims at quite different levels, although his rhetoric does not demonstrate an awareness of these differing levels. The credibility of unbroken genealogical continuity among all life forms has, he says, been established. The concept of special creation has been, once and for all time, discredited. Hence, the existence of the entire universe, complete with its remarkably robust formational economy, may be taken for granted as a starting point that needs no explanation. The first claim is stated by Dennett with characteristic immodesty. To put it bluntly but fairly, everyone today who doubts that the variety of life on this planet was produced by a process of evolution is simply ignorant, inexcusably ignorant, in a world where 3 out of 4 people have learned to read and write. Suppose we were to restate that claim more politely and in a more comprehensive form, drawing on some of the conceptual vocabulary introduced. Here it is in italics. We have substantial empirical warrant for presuming that matter and material systems do possess the resident capabilities for self-organization and transformation of the sort envisioned by evolutionary theorizing in sciences such as cosmology and biology. The concept of evolution continuity employed in contemporary scientific reconstructions of the formational history of both physical and biotic forms is strongly supported by its fruitfulness and accounting for a plethora of observable features of the physical and biotic world. Seen in this form, I would not only be willing but eager to give my assent. Although I cannot, of course, prove its validity, I do judge it to be a warranted belief. So it's saying we have enough demonstrations of self-organization and transformation of the sort envisioned by evolutionary theorizing. So let the evolutionary people theorize the way that they want to. It gives us a different perspective. And this quote is saying, I see no problem with that. Dennett's second claim follows quite directly from the first. Given the credibility of unbroken genealogical continuity, we are then warranted in rejecting the concept of special creation, a picture of divine creative action centered on the presumption that matter and material systems do not possess sufficient self-organizational transformational capacities to make evolutionary continuity possible, and that substantial gaps in the formational economy of the universe have been bridged by a succession of extraordinary divine creative acts in the course of time. Once again, I must say that I concur with Dennett in his rejection of the special creationist picture of the formational history of life forms. Okay, so that's where we are going to stop for today. And we've got just a couple more pages in this chapter. So we're going to start probably tomorrow, the next chapter, the chapter 4 of this section, and chapter, I think, 6 in the book. The God who infinitely transcends infinity. That's by Robert Russell. Okay, all right. So this is Dr. Annette Feravich. We have been here only for 40 minutes. Boy, Reading takes a lot out of me. I've already said that. It is day 341. It is April 28th. We have just gotten finished with the reading room. Well, we are back on our 3 days on after our 4 days off of working to make our minds, our bodies, and our spirits healthier. Thanks for joining me.